Hi guys, my name is Aaron and I'm here to share my Season 14 Cassiopeia guide. In this video, I won't get too much into how to play Cassiopeia, her abilities, or even her tricks and tips because I've already done that on a guide right here. So if you guys want to check that out before this one, I'd highly recommend it. Now to start things off, I do need to show some credibility that I'm still able to play Cassio at a decent level, otherwise my opinions on builds becomes null if I don't. With that being said, I recently just did an unranked fresh account to Masters solo and was able to get an 80% win rate, all games played on stream with mic and cam. Now some people will say 80% win rate is not that good, but being able to do that on stream is an achievement in itself, and I know most other streamers would agree as well. I know there are other people that will say, oh, my win rate's gonna, plummet as the higher I climb, but as of right now, I am currently at Masters 194 LP with still a very high win rate at a 78%, so we are very close to GM with that. I'll be updating my progress on my rank both on Reddit and on my Discord, but if you guys want to see me play live, you guys can check out my stream right here, and I would appreciate if you guys follow, and if you guys have any questions, you guys can ask me there as well. Now that we got that out of the way, we're going to start with runes. I want to start off with runes because the rune choices are what kind of dictates what build I opt to go. Obviously, Conquer, Phase Rush, Electrocute, if you want to have fun and troll around, are all viable, and as of recent, even though it isn't that new, the Airy with Precision Tree has been kind of taking over and gaining popularity, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it. I will still get into depth on why it can be good, so if it works for you, it works. So let's start with Conquer. In my previous guide, I went into depth on every possible rune combination, so for this specific video, I'll just be discussing on what I go and what works for me. So just remember, my way of playing is different from others, so what works for me might not work for you. So everything is pretty much the same in my previous guide with the Conquer setup. You would take Conquer, Presence of Mind, Legend Tenacity, and Last Stand. And even in my previous guide, I would typically go for Domination Tree second and choose Ghost Sporo and Taste of Blood. But the only difference in this season is that instead of Taste of Blood, I'm actually going Ingenious Hunter and Ghost Sporo. And I'll go into more depth on why I take Ingenious Hunter over Taste of Blood later in this video when I talk about builds. Last but not least, in the extra shards that you get, I would take Double Adaptive, and I would either take Slow Resistance or Health Scaling. For the most part, I would take these into matchups that I don't need to gap close on that well, or dodge or CC, or if they don't have any slows, or if they just have like a lot of tanky members that are also melee as well. Since Conquer kinda centered as well into champions that kinda are melee or run into you as well. The second core rune choice I go is Phase Rush. I usually only take Phase Rush in matchups that outrange me and need to get into their face as quickly as possible, or dodge their CC when I'm trying to all in to create some kill pressure. It also helps with slow champion CCs like Ori W or Ori QW, or even like Victor W. And it's very hard to like run past it because it slows you, but if you have Phase Rush, it allows you to close that gap and potentially kill them as well. So it's pretty much the same core rune choices. You want to go obviously Phase Rush, Mana Flow, Transcendence, and Gathering Storm. In the secondary tree, you would go Precision, and you would go Presence of Mind, and Last Stand. In the additional shards, you would actually go Ability Haste. You can technically go Movement Speed here if you truly think you need it. It is very nice, but it's not necessary. Sometimes I would go even more Adaptive or even more Health. Typically, I choose between these two though. And the last but not least, you would either go Slow Resistance again or Health as well. Last but not least, I still want to get into the Area Rune, even though I personally don't run it myself. I know a lot of people are curious about it. The idea behind Area is that you are able to have some lane pryals in matchups that seem impossible, like Ori, Syndra, Azir, Victor, and you do surprising amount of damage if you start Q level 1. There are people who max Q, but in my opinion, that kind of hinders skirmishes that happen early, so I advise you not to do that. And if anything, if you do want to do it, you either only want to put 1 point into Q or even 3 point Q and still max E after that. The rune setup for that is you go Airy, Mana Flow, Transcendence, Scorch, Presence of Mind, Last Stand, and Double Adaptive. And you can either go Tenacity, Slow Resistance, or Health and Scaling. Make sure you start with Doran's Ring and you start Q, and if you can throw in some autos after throwing in some Qs, that would be good, but it's not necessary. It's just like the ideal situation if you can, without getting like poked or hit by any abilities. So now we're gonna get into the juicy part of this video and talk about builds. So if I'm running the Conquer setup from earlier in this video, I opt to go for a tier start and rush Seraphs. Rushing Ceres feels really nice because in my opinion having ability haste early on feels really nice and can help you win skirmishes if you do have it. Now the reason why I'm rushing Ceres with this specific rune setup with Ingenious Hunter is because Ingenious Hunter helps stacks tier faster, which in turn you'll have a Ceres stacked faster as well. I think the fastest I was able to finish Ceres with Ingenious Hunter is around 10 minutes, and I think that's pretty fast overall. From the games I took Ingenious, I stacked tier like 70 to 80 more stacks compared to not having Ingenious. Another reason why I take Ingenious is because I take Ghost Portal. If you guys didn't know, Ghost Portal gives you AP every time your ward expires, and if nobody clears it. You gain 2 AP for every Ghost Portal spawned, and if it spots an enemy champion and they walk on top of it, then you get an additional 2 AP on top of the 2 AP you got from spawning it. It stacks all the way up to 20 AP, and then after 20 AP, it gives you another 10 AP for a free total of 30 AP. Ingenious Hunter helps recharge your wards faster, so it helps you get the spike sooner as well. In addition, Ingenious will help with any active item CDR such as Zhonya's, Banshees, Horizon, etc, etc. After rushing Ceres, most people would do Rylai's second, but I kinda opt for an ability haste item as my second item because Cassio without ability haste feels really clunky and I hate that feeling. The item of my choice is Horizon Focus because it gives 90 ability power, 20 ability haste, and also you get a 10% damage amp if you can proc an ability within 600 range, and Cassio's Q can easily proc it more often than not. Now that I have ability haste as my first 2 items, my third item is actually Rylai's. Now, Rylai's is a perfect item as a third because it gives utility and chase down potential, as well as health to stand and fight for long periods of time. As a 4th, 5th, and 6th item, it all really depends on how the game state is and what items the enemy team is building. If they are building heavy MR, obviously Crypto/Void is a good 4th item. If they have multiple assassins, whether that be AP or AD, then I have to go for Zhonya's or Banshees. If they have tons of health, or if they aren't building MR, or they don't have assassins or ways to easily kill me, then Liandry's is a perfect choice as well. Do want to mention that another choice that I have been doing is Cosmic Drive second in replacement to Horizon as a second item. I haven't really been doing it recently, but it is a viable choice if you do enjoy having that extra movement speed to dodge abilities or kite better. Just as a reminder though, if you are building Cosmic Drive, don't build Rylai's third. Having both Rylai's and Cosmic is very redundant because both are essentially doing the job of closing the gap and closing the distance, plus your damage will feel god awful if you do this build. As a third item, if I do build Cosmic, I'd probably opt for Liandry's or Riftmaker. So an example final build would look like Ceres first item, Horizon second, Rylai's third, Liandry's fourth, Crypto Bloom as a 5th item, and last but not least, Zhonya's as a 6th item. Now, obviously, like I said before, the 4th, 5th, and 6th slot will all be interchangeable depending on how the game state is and what they are building and what champs they have. I will say that Rabadon's is probably my least favorite choice because it just gives raw AP and no other stats, so it's not that good of an item, which is why I didn't include it in the example final build. An example final build with Cosmic Drive would be Ceres first item, Cosmic Drive second item, Liandry's third item, and I would go for a Crypto Bloom, Riftmaker, and Zhonya's. Like I said again, as I keep on mentioning, that the 4th, 5th, and 6th item slots will be very dependent on how the game is going. Now, with my 2 setups with Conquer and Phase Rush, I always will start with tier in only 1 pot. And the reason for 1 pot is that I don't really get poked out that often. I do take bases quite often as well because I manage my waves. And so I usually just sell that pot for refillable anyway, so I can save that extra 50 gold. Because I'm a greedy bastard, that's pretty much the reason why. The only time that I would actually not do tier start would probably be if I'm doing the airy build setup and whatnot. Now we're going to talk about the Phase Rush setup. Just as the Conquer setup before, I always like to start tier and only go 1 pot. I typically like to go for a Rylai's Rush instead of Ceres because these mage matchups or champions that outrange Cassio are very hard to close the distance, but being able to rush Rylai's helps in chasing these champions down. Although you can argue that going Rylai's in the Conquer setup as a first item is also viable, but if the enemy champion has some sort of slow, such as Ori QW or Victor W or Karma Module Q like I mentioned earlier, then even with Rylai's, you will never be able to find that kill pressure because they close that distance by slowing you. but with Face Rush, you get slow resistance and the speed up to catch up, which is why I find this build very viable. Now, as a third item, there are two different choices you can go, or two different paths you can take. You can either go for the Horizon Focus as a third item, because obviously we talked about it earlier, it gives the ability haste and it gives that amp damage. But it's not necessary if you are running the Phase Rush setup, because you are taking Transcendence and you are taking the extra ability haste and those extra shards that you get. So you don't really need to go this, and you can kind of opt to go a little bit more tanky and go for a Liandry's, which in turn also is not even a bad item anyways, because you do get a damage amp and the burn too. Now, I do want to mention that because I am rushing Rylai's as a first item instead of a mana item, I'm going to be pretty mana hungry early on, which is why I opt to go for the Presence of Mind and the Precision Tree instead of going for the Domination Tree that I've done before. Plus, I don't really need that Ingenious Hunter to stack my tier faster since I am not rushing Ceres as well. Now, once again, the 4th, 5th, and 6th item slots are really dependent on how the game is being played out and what they are building. You can either go Riftmaker, Zhonya's, Banshees, Rabadon's, Void Staff, or Crypto. All are very viable. An example final build would look like Rylai's first item, Seraph's second item, Liandry's third item, Crypto, Bloom as a 4th, Zhonya's as a 5th, and Riftmaker last. Now, like I said, once again, the 4th, 5th, and 6th item are all interchangeable, so don't be afraid to like switch it up. If you like Rabadons, you like Rabadons as well. So you don't have to listen to me. I just don't like Rabadons. Now, I do want to talk about an extra bonus setup that you can do and has been pretty fun when I play it. And that would actually be very good against heavy AD comps such as Irelia mid or Kindred jungle or like Zed mid and Graves jungle, stuff like that. So what you want to do is you do want to run the Conquer setup for this. So make sure you copy the rune pages for that. You want to start tier first item with 1 pot as per usual. You want to rush Ceres, and then you want to rush Frozen Heart, and then you get Liandry's as a third item. Now, I know what most of you guys are thinking, like, oh, but if you go with defensive items second, you're going to do no damage. Now, that might be sort of true, but since you are running the Conquer setup, you get AP from stacking Conquer, which is very easy to do on Cassio, as well as taking the double adaptive in the additional shards, and you're taking Ghost Portal. So technically, you're not really missing out on too much damage. And then once you get your Liandry's, obviously you will start seeing the damage difference. So with this specific setup, you can go for a Ceres first item, Frozen Heart as a second, third is Liandry's, Crypto or Void as a 4th item, the 5th item you go Riftmaker, and the last item you go Zhonya's. And once again, I feel like I'm a broken record player at this point, but the 4th, 5th, and 6th items are all interchangeable, and it's just really depending on how the game is going for you. I do want to include, since I saw in a Reddit post that they wanted me to tell you when Cassio is strong and when Cassio can fight. Cassio can be strong through all levels, but before first base, you kind of want to conserve your mana and mainly use your Q to poke and never use your E's, even if you aren't going for the airy build. Make sure to space well and act like you're going to all in with Cassio as soon as you land your Q, but don't actually go in. This way you're forcing pressure on the enemy player as well as making sure he misses CS or at least has to contest CS with his ability, which in turn, then you can throw a couple E's on him. Once you get your first space off, you should be actively looking for more trades with E and whittle them down until you can find a kill angle. Thank you to everyone who made it to the end of the video, and I hope you guys enjoyed my Season 14 Cassiopeia guide. I know I always say this, but my playstyle is different from everyone else's playstyle, so I'm not the best, nor is this the correct way of playing, but this is something that worked for me, and I hope it works for you as well. If you guys enjoyed, please feel free to drop a like or comment your opinions about it, and make sure to follow my Twitch if you guys want to see me play live. And also make sure to check the other guide that I have made about the abilities and tricks and tips before you watch this one, so that you know how to fully play Cassio and use her to the fullest potential. Thank you. Bye.